Hey folks, you found GSTV. That stands for Good Stuff Television. We celebrate entertainment from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. And the cool thing about GSTV, you never know what's coming up next.
Hey Spidey, isn't Marvel's new Pizzazz Magazine fantastic?
Fantastic, but not perfect.
But Pizzazz has the lowdown on Jaws too, and more Sean Cassidy picks than his mother. It's sensational.
Sensational, but not perfect.
How about Pizzazz's Goofy Guide to TV? It's wild look at sci-fi movies. It's games, puzzles, comics. What could be more perfect?
Me on the cover, not the Hulk.
Pizzazz, the almost perfect new monthly from the off-the-wall gang at Marvel Comics.
Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Of all the Marvel comic book characters, Spider-Man has always been my favorite. Growing up, I loved the animated series. But this video is not about the Ralph Bakshi classic cartoon. Instead, let's spend a little time talking about my favorite live-action Spider-Man from 70s television. So first, let's talk about the version of Spidey that showed up on network TV, CBS TV to be exact. During the latter half of the 70s, CBS seemed to be the home for Marvel comic book characters on television. Most well known was, of course, the Incredible Hulk. But I remember a couple of Captain America movies, a Doctor Strange movie, and of course, what I'm talking about here today. This version of Spider-Man debuted in a couple of television movies starring Nicholas Hammond. Hammond was a bit old in my mind to play Peter Parker, but he wasn't my biggest gripe in terms of casting. It was Robert F. Simon who was cast as J. Jonah Jameson in the second TV movie in the series that, well, he wasn't my J. Jonah. He just didn't seem blustery enough. I needed an actor who could really project his absolute disgust for the wall crawler, and I never thought this guy could. Quick piece of trivia, David White, who played Darren's boss Larry Tate in Bewitched, was J. Jonah in the first TV movie. Anyway, let me step off my J. Jonah soapbox and talk about Nicholas Hammond for just a moment. Yep, he does look familiar, and yes, he was one of the children in The Sound of Music. He wasn't a bad Peter Parker. He really wasn't. Just a bit old for the role. Personally, I liked his appearance on the Brady Bunch. Yep, I'll admit it, I have a soft spot for Sherwood Schwartz comedies, especially the Brady Bunch. More to come on that show on another day, but Hammond's appearance on the Brady Bunch just happened to be during one of my favorite episodes, where it's a classic episode, in fact, where Marcia gets hit in the face with a football. When her nose swells up, she learns some really important lessons about how people treat each other based on their appearances. Hammond also got a chance to make a guest appearance on the TV version of Logan's Run with his Sound of Music co-star, the lovely Heather Menzies. And according to Wikipedia, after the Spider-Man series ended, Hammond guest starred on a lot of shows in the early 80s, including The Love Boat, Magnum P.I., Murder, She Wrote, and recurring roles on Falcon Crest and Dallas. It was when he was cast as yachtsman Dennis Conner in the 1986 Australian TV miniseries The Challenge that Hammond realized he loved Australia and decided to stay there. Hammond shows up on TV and movies every now and again, but really more than anything else, he just seems to be enjoying life. Anyway, getting back to your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Well, folks, without CGI and all of the cool effects that we take for granted today, the web-slinger's special abilities were, to be frank, at least on this show, a little less special. The team involved in the series did their best with what they had, given their budget. They were a network TV show, but really, the web slinging, the wall crawling, was all pretty lame. It's probably the reason why it would be many years before another live-action version of Spider-Man was attempted again. And that's not to say that the movies and the series weren't enjoyable. They certainly had their moments. One of my favorite was when Joanna Cameron guest starred. But guess what, folks? This live-action version isn't my favorite. In fact, the live-action version of Spider-Man that's my favorite, well, it starred a little-known actor / puppeteer / dancer named Danny Seagren. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I bet he's talking about Spidey super stories on that educational program, The Electric Company, you would be 100% correct. And if you're thinking, what the heck, the web slinging and the wall crawling on this version was even worse than the CBS series, well, you'd be 100% correct as well. But you know what? I don't care. This is the live-action version that is nearest and dearest to my heart. Well, at least until we got the Sam Raimi movies. Once we went there, well, game over. So the story behind the story is that Marvel allowed the Electric Company, which was part of the Public Broadcasting System's educational lineup, to use the character of Spider-Man free of charge. It was Stan Lee and team's chance to do a little good in this world, and of course, it also introduced future customers to one of Marvel's biggest draws. And these Spidey super stories were 3 to 5 minute adventures that started appearing on the Electric Company during Season 4. In this version of Spider-Man, our hero didn't speak out loud. Instead, kids would need to read comic balloons. Yep, there's the educational part of the series. But beyond helping kids read, the episodes were really silly and a whole lot of fun. There were no special effects for things like Spider-Man spinning his web. So what we would get instead would be an actual comic book panel. Throughout it all, Danny Seagren just crossed his fingers and hoped to high heavens that the creative team involved didn't figure out that because there was no Peter Parker in this version of Spider-Man, they really could have put almost anyone that was roughly the same size and stature in the costume. Danny's a really interesting guy, and there are a couple of great articles on him out there on the interwebs. Just do a Google search and you'll find them. His last name is spelled S-E-A-G-R-E-N. These days, Danny hits the comic conventions from time to time and leads the kind of life that one might expect of someone who never really showed his face on TV. Complete anonymity, unless of course he wants to draw attention to his famous past. So that's it, folks. Do you remember seeing Spider-Man on the Electric Company or on the primetime series on CBS? If so, what did you think? Did you prefer one over the other? I'm betting it would have a lot to do on your age. Let me know in the comment section below, and while you're at it, please click on the thumbs up icon, and why not consider subscribing to my channel. I talk about music, movies, and television, mostly from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Hey folks, you found GSTV. That stands for Good Stuff Television. We celebrate entertainment from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. And the cool thing about GSTV, you never know what's coming up next.
Hello, citizens. I'm taking a holiday from crime fighting in Gotham City. No rest from danger, though, because all around us is that deadly daily danger, traffic. I admire the way all you British children triumph over this danger by learning and using the road safety code, like curb drill. Before crossing the road, you stop at the curb, look right, look left, look right again, and then only if the road is clear, walk quickly across. Now, children, how does it go? At the curb, stop. Look right, look left, look right again. If all's clear, walk quickly across. Remember, be smart, be safe. Always do your curb drill.
If you got a case that needs super detection, we'll give come the capers and we never lose. 8D is first, I'm cool and I'm clever. Just like a bloodhound, he'll sniff out the clues. Then there is Bugs, I'm tough and I'm feisty. He takes care of trouble cause he's super strong. And Tuesday's the one who's all full of sunshine. Me and the Venom will sure get along. And Docky's got the looks and the brains to catch the crews.
Ah, come on.
We're the kids, we're the kids, we're the kids from Caper. We'll race to your place, solve your case every time. We're the kids, we're the kids, we're the kids from Caper. For real war and no more against crime. solve your case every time. We're the kids, we're the kids, we're the kids from Caper. War in a war evermore against crime. We're the kids from Caper. We're the crook. We're the kids from Caper. We handle the bad stuff. We're the kids from Caper. We fight the flood. We're the kids from Caper. Get the goods on the hood. We're the kids from Caper.
Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. When you think about children's programs, it really doesn't get any more iconic than this one. It truly was a wonderful show, and growing up, I couldn't get enough of it. I think a lot of that had to do with Fred Rogers himself. He was such an amazing person. From everything that I've learned over the years, it sounds like he was the real deal, a kind man with a gentle heart. I learned a lot from watching that show. He talked about treating everyone with love and respect, and he taught me that it was okay to make mistakes, and perhaps most importantly, he let me know episode after episode that it was okay to have a big imagination, that there was no harm in dreaming big. I distinctly recall the first time that I ever watched the show. We did it as a family, and my dad kept talking about how great the show was. Dad didn't often watch TV with me when I was young, so this was a really special treat. A treat that I hoped would be repeated again and again. So a few days later, when I was watching Gilligan's Island as he arrived home from work, I thought maybe he'd settle on in and watch some island hijinks with me. But that was not the case. Instead, my dad sent me upstairs to do some chores and turned the channel to some sort of news show. Back then, news seemed like it was the most boring show in the world, and it was on all the time. A few days later, I thought the old man might want to watch the Brady Bunch with me. It was, after all, a show about family. But nope, again, he sent me away from the TV to do some chores. And once I was out of the way, he turned the channel to something super boring. I remember he liked both the Huntley-Brinkley newscast as well as Cronkite. I just can't remember which one he favored. I do remember a couple of times where he would sit down and watch F Troop with me, but that was a real rarity. Most often he would send me away from the TV to do chores and watch those dang news shows. And this was a problem, mostly because he was sending me away to do chores, but I also had the sneaking feeling that if I hadn't been watching something that he didn't want to watch, he wouldn't have come up with an excuse to get me away from the TV. So what could I do? How could I avoid this conundrum in the future? And then I realized my answer. Yep, Fred Rogers' greatest lesson for me was that if I was watching something educational, something good for me, like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, my dad wouldn't send me away to do chores. Instead, he'd grab the newspaper and read that while I continued to watch TV. This could go on for hours if I was lucky, because apparently the same rules applied for Sesame Street. And the Electric Company. And yes, that's Spider-Man in the upper right-hand corner. And even Zoom. Man, I loved that theme song. So it turns out I owe this man much. He taught me many life lessons, but perhaps the greatest of all was that my parents wanted the best for me. They wanted me to learn, and if they thought I was learning while I was watching TV, well, they would leave me the heck alone. Probably not the lesson you thought I was going to share, but hey, it was an important one that I would remember and leverage throughout my entire youth. So a couple more things about this Fred Rogers guy. First and foremost, there was that rumor that Rogers had been a sniper, a Navy SEAL, or some sort of reformed criminal. The website Snopes investigated those claims and debunked every single one of them. In a world full of fake news, this one is perhaps the fakest of all, because Fred Rogers was exactly the man that he played on TV, a kind and gentle friend to all. Rogers also had an eye for talent. If you're thinking that's Michael Keaton there on the right, well, you are correct. One of his earliest TV gigs was as a stagehand for the show. It was a formative experience for Keaton. So much so that he has spoken about it a number of times and quite frankly has nothing but positive things to say about the man and his time hanging out in the neighborhood. And as long as we're talking about this particular show, I guess I should probably admit that Lady Aberlin, King Friday's niece, was one of my first TV crushes. She was just so darn pretty and super nice as well. Maybe in a future video I'll talk more about the actress Betty Aberlin and how she became involved in the show and why she stayed with it for all 33 years and what she did afterward. Would you believe that she was in a bunch of Kevin Smith movies? So that's it. One more picture. Let's close with Lady Aberlin and good old Henrietta Pussycat. Such a fun show. Sure, I grew out of it and moved on to other things, but you know what? I never stopped admiring the show or the man who created it. Alright, now it's your turn. Please share your memories in the comments section. And while you're at it, I'd love a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. And I would be absolutely honored if you would consider subscribing to my channel. I talk about music, movies, and television, mostly from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you so much for watching.
This is Lindsay Wagner. Here are some scenes from the next episode of The Bionic Woman.
Robots, I call them fembots.
These mannequins aren't going to fool anybody.
Good morning, Mr. Goldman.
Good morning, Miss Callahan. Kidnap Oscar Goldman.
I order all action units to kill me as soon as possible. Goodbye.
Amy, cut the magnetic car! Capture. Increase power on the fembots.
You no match for us, Summers.
Hi, I'm James Earl Jones at the filming of a great new television show for preschool children. It's called Sesame Street, and it's made to help your 3 to 5-year-olds learn some of the things they'll need in school. Sesame Street is a whole hour every day, Monday to Friday, of lessons of every kind. The alphabet, numbers, basic reasoning skills, lessons that help them better understand the world around them. And it's all delivered in a fast-paced fun, action, and excitement. I'm going to be a guest on the show. So tune us all in for your kids on Sesame Street.
I can see, I believe that it's magic. Your mission is magic, your love will shine through. Do you believe in magic? Cause I believe that I do. Yes, I can see, I believe that it's magic. Your mission is magic, your love will shine through.
The Electric Company was an educational program from the Children's Television Workshop, the same folks who created Sesame Street. When it first debuted, I was still a big fan of Bert, Ernie, Cookie Monster, and Grover. You know, the really cool Sesame Street characters. But over the course of the next couple of years, as I matured ever so slightly, I really started enjoying the Electric Company. One of the reasons, for sure, was the extremely talented cast. This is a photo, I believe, from Season 2. I say that because Bill Cosby is gone, but in his place is the incredibly talented Jim Boyd. More on him in a moment. Also, bottom left, yep, that's Rita Moreno. Alright, I just need to move on because we're going to talk a lot about this wonderful cast as I count down my top 5 characters from the show. So let's get cracking and start with number 5. Back to Jim Boyd. His character of J. Arthur Crank just cracked me up. He was a little bit like J. Jonah Jameson from Spider-Man. He was kinda like a human version of Oscar the Grouch as well. In fact, the two of them actually teamed up. Anyway, his stick was to burst in on a sketch, interrupting everything when something just didn't make sense to him. You know, it really is a tribute to the talents of Jim Boyd that this grump, This cantankerous old coot was just so darn likable. Number 4 is none other than the great Morgan Freeman as Easyreader. Man, that dude was so cool. He made me want to read. I wanted to be just like him with his fancy sunglasses and his super hip leather vest. And Easy had a way with the ladies. Boy, did he have a way with the ladies, especially those foxy librarians. Sadly, the librarians that I've encountered over the years were neither all that foxy or all that attracted to voracious readers such as myself. But I digress. You know, I've got to hand it to Morgan. He totally sold me on this reading thing. If I wasn't a believer beforehand, I certainly was after seeing how cool it made Easyreader, and would certainly make me. I think the only guy cooler than Easyreader in the 70s was the Fonz. But that's another topic for another day. On to number 3. Coming in at the 3rd spot is Skip Heinent as Fargo North Decoder. He was a detective of sorts, a self-proclaimed world's most famous decoder of messages. The character was slightly reminiscent of Inspector Clouseau from those Pink Panther movies. And in case after case, North would have to decode and or unscramble messages. Not sure why the frog needs to be flown to London in this sketch, but you get my drift. Watching these clips again, and yes, you can find a bunch on YouTube, you can really see why these were so much fun. There's a rhythm to them, as there is with most good comedy sketches. A comedic beat, if you will. Anyway, they're fun. And the character definitely had its fans. So much so, in fact, that Fargo North, along with Easyreader, was the most marketed of all the original Electric Company characters. Notice how I say original there? More on that in a moment. I had the book and record there. I didn't have the game. It looks like fun, though. If anyone ever played the game, I'd love to hear about it in the comments section. Alright, let's keep counting down. Number 2 is Jennifer of the Jungle, played by, and I know I'm going to mess up her name, but I've got to try, Judy Graubart. Anyway, this lady was so funny. And you know what? Just like in all of her sketches, Judy seems so nice. And to make things even better, Jennifer had a gorilla companion named Paul. Inside the suit was J. Arthur Crank himself, Jim Boyd. I always thought Judy could have been on Saturday Night Live or SCTV. She just had that kind of star quality. Instead, she showed up on a bunch of commercials during the 70s. I think advertisers realized that Judy's trademark niceness really made her seem like she was a friend, someone you could trust to tell you what laundry detergent works best, or which eye drops are most effective. Jennifer of the Jungle and Paul also made an appearance in the Spidey Super Stories comic book, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I've already let the cat out of the bag. Because my favorite character from the Electric Company is none other than your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. The first live-action TV Spider-Man, in fact, played by Danny Seagrin. Spidey showed up during later seasons of the show. Use of Spider-Man on the show was actually a gift from Marvel Comics and Stan Lee. Crazy like a fox, Stan knew that teaching kids to read, especially with a character like Spidey, would lead kids directly to his comic books. So anyway, the Electric Company was able to use the character free of charge, and they did so during 29 short segments, which ran from 1974 to 1977, and then of course much later on in reruns. And just like in the comic books, this particular version of Spider-Man only talked through word balloons. He also didn't tackle the big baddies, the super villains that you would read about in the comics and see later on in the movies. But still, it was Spider-Man, and he was on TV. You get it? Every day I would rush home from school hoping that Spidey would show up on the Electric Company that evening. And Spidey Super Stories proved to be very popular, so much so that Marvel launched an easy-to-read Spidey Super Stories comic book. Hey, I had that book right there, the first issue. Of course, my mother sold it in a garage sale years later, along with a boatload of really valuable Star Wars comics, but again, it's a story for another day. Spidey Super Stories also showed up in audio format in Peter Pan Records. Like I said, Stan Lee was crazy like a fox. He truly was one of the most talented, smartest guys within the comic book industry. Wait, did I say one of? I meant the most talented, smartest guy ever in the industry. So there you go, my top 5 favorite characters from the Electric Company. Anthony Davis, if you're watching this video, thanks for the suggestion, and I hope you enjoyed it. Speaking of enjoyment, I really enjoyed the Electric Company magazine that hit the newsstands for a few years during the show's heyday. Truly good stuff, and I'm sure Easyreader would have approved of the purchase. One more thing, I know I didn't talk much about Rita Moreno during this video. She's so talented, I feel kind of bad, but here she is. Back in the 70s, if there was one thing the show was known for, it was one of her characters, I think her name was Millie, and she'd scream, "Hey you guys!" at the top of her lungs. Those segments and that particular phrase became so popular that after a couple of years, the show's intro began with Rita shouting her iconic phrase. And of course, the phrase became even more a part of pop culture history when a triumphant sloth yelled it during a pivotal scene in the classic 80s movie, The Goonies. Alright, one final picture. Again, Ms. Moreno. I think I know what she's yelling here, do you? Okay, it's your turn now. What do you think? Did you have a favorite character that I missed? Or do you have a completely different top 5 list? Anyway, please share your memories in the comments section below, and while you're at it, please click on the thumbs up icon, and why not consider whether or not you'd like to subscribe to my channel. I talk about music, movies, and television, mostly from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you for watching. Hey folks, you found GSTV. That stands for Good Stuff Television. We celebrate entertainment from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. And the cool thing about GSTV, you never know what's coming up next.
When people talk about the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, they talk about the wild outfits and those cool guests. But man, there's so much more to that show. I mean, Sonny just captures the passion in every song. He makes it look so easy. But you see, that's talent. That's talent shining through there. That man is always on. And comedy, just watch his delivery here. No, Cher! Now that's comedy. Here's another one.
A nose job!
Oh man, that's good. His timing is impeccable. Look, here he's dancing. Yeah, man, he doesn't need fancy steps. You can see it all comes from the soul. That man has soul. Oh man, that's good. Yeah. Sonny Bono is a multi-talented, singing, dancing, one-man entertainment machine. He is the show. I mean, without Sonny, what would that show...
Cut! Mr. Bono, that was great. Although, could we try it again, and this time, could you stick to the script that we gave you?
All right, sure.
Great. And action.
Watch the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour right here on TV Land.